Welcome to Think Big with Dan and Qasim. Join hosts Dan Melnick and Qasim Masood as they explore big ideas, limitless possibilities, and engage with visionaries, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders who dare to dream big, get inspired, motivated, and find practical tips for personal growth. Think big, dream bigger, and ignite your potential.
Welcome to the Think Big with Dan and Qasim. Today, our guest is Zack Walmer. Zack, how are you doing today?
Doing great. Happy to be here.
Awesome. So, Zack, let us know what you do and where you live.
Certainly. So I'm a co-founder here at Scored. This is the second company that I've founded, and I live in New York.
Awesome. So, let us know a little bit about the inspiration behind starting a business. First of all, let us know why you decided that you should be a business owner and instead of doing a corporate job.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think I made that call when I was around 6 or 7 years old. I remember growing up and always wanting to start companies. My first were more lemonade stands and yard service businesses when I was 9, 10. So entrepreneurship's always been in my blood. Then in college I founded our entrepreneurship society, and I was always in pitch competitions, and so it was always something that kind of ran through me. And I have folks in my family that have started their own businesses in real estate and elsewhere, and so it's always kind of been a part of my upbringing and identity. But then I spent the first 8 years of my career in management consulting, which, to me at the time was kind of the closest next thing to starting your own business, because you got exposure to so many different problems and different projects and whatnot. But then 8 years after that, started my own consultancy with two partners. And that was my first company that I co-founded. And then about 6 months ago, started my second company, Scored. But I guess the net question of why did I start my own company is, it's just always been a part of me. It was always really not an option. I always felt like, I wanted to make my mark on the world through creating net new companies and groups of people.
That's great. So, when you started your company, was there any other element as well? Like, were you trying to fill in some gap in the market, or you was just inspired from something else?
Yeah, it's been an interesting road. So Scored was co-founded with a few other great folks, Chris Creel, Ash Arnwine, Srikant Reddy. And it really, the genesis was, messy and interesting. The real genesis was, my co-founder Chris and I were talking about, different ways that we could disrupt the professional services market originally, because my background is all in consulting, professional services. And one of the big problems in that area was, how to find the right professional services partners, right? If you're a company looking to find the right consultancy or accounting firm or law firm or software engineering firm or whatever, finding that right fit is very difficult from all my experience and my co-founders. And so originally Scored was a tool to help people find that right fit partner, but then over time morphed into what it is today, which is really a tool to help organizations find acquisition targets in the M&A space. Because what we found was that, well, I think that is a problem, finding the right partner. People in the market didn't quite feel that pain enough to justify the expense of a tool like Scored. But when we talked to a lot of different stakeholders, the people that did find it interesting and valuable were folks that were involved in mergers and acquisitions and using this tool to really segment a marketplace to what are the exact right fit acquisition targets for that use case, which at the end of the day is the same idea. You're just helping find a very specific kind of company in both cases. And so I think it comes down to the net of just build something people want. And what people really wanted was an acquisition search tool rather than a professional services provider search tool. And that's the direction we went in. And it resonates well with my background, because I also was involved in a lot of inorganic growth strategies as a consultant. And it's true that companies have a very hard time finding that kind of right fit acquisition that's going to propel them to the next level of growth. So fits with my background as well.
Great. So, in terms of a differentiator, what is your differentiator from the others in the market?
Yeah, good question. So I would think about it kind of as an ecosystem of services. So if you think about the mergers and acquisitions field, there's a general workflow that I tend to think about, from discovering kind of what's the thesis that you want to pursue, like what's the realm of acquisition you want to engage in, to scanning the market for potential fits, all potential fits in a given market, to triaging those potential targets into what are the exact right fits, then reaching out to engage in conversations, and eventually due diligence and having a transaction and post-merger integration, right? So there's this whole kind of timeline of events that tend to happen in M&A. And so where I think there's some really good tools out there is in the front end of discovering the universe of potential acquisition targets. And so there's tools like Zoom Info and PitchBook and all these great databases that have, hundreds of millions of potential companies that you can look at and research. The hard part comes after that, which is once you've shortlisted, call it 1,000, 2,000, some number of companies, which of those are really a specific fit for your specific search? Because it gets down to criteria that are often harder to discern, like, is the age of the founders, will they be willing to sell? Is the fit with the customer base and your customer base going to be kind of coherent? Do they have a talent bench that's going to be worth investing in? All these questions that are very hard to find out just using specific current databases. And the alternative, which most people do now, is a lot of manual work using either analysts or outside advisors, et cetera. And so where Scored really fits is after the databases is really doing the work of analyzing each potential company for fit with that specific company's acquisition target. And so I think about it less as, who our competition is, and more where we fit in the ecosystem of tools, because where we fit, I don't see really any other companies fitting in that specific space. So that's the kind of long answer to your question anyhow.
Awesome. So marketing is an important element for every business, I believe. And nowadays, marketing is getting advanced day by day. Digital marketing is on its top. So for your business, what type of marketing you are adapting? You are going offline, or you are just relying on word of mouth, or you are using digital marketing as well? And if you are using digital marketing as well, then what's the role of digital marketing in your business?
Yeah, good question. So yeah, I would say we're still early on, right? So we founded Scored, depending on when you count the start date, 6 months to a year ago. So we're still very much in experimentation mode. And so we're experimenting with a ton of different methods for marketing and sales. I would say a few of the ones that we're trying are cold outbound email, like everybody engages in, social media, outbound, advertising on Google and LinkedIn, in-person events, which is certainly advantageous to be here in New York, where there's a lot of M&A activity and actors in that space. And then of course, personal networks, where a lot of founders get their start as their friends that and contacts in the industry that may be buyers. And so we're trying a bit of everything. I think the thing that's really interesting to me is the impact of generative AI in the marketing space, right? Because everybody now is using Gen AI to flood the market with various messages that can seem somewhat authentic, and they can achieve incredible scale with less resources, which in some sense is really great for entrepreneurs to have those tools. But it also means that if for the consumers of that marketing, it's very hard to cut through that noise, right? Because you're going to hit with messages left and right and center. And so what I've found interesting in some of my research on this topic is that a lot of people are coming kind of full circle in terms of marketing tactics to the very low tech. And so I've seen a lot of recommendations to send envelopes, right? To go back to conferences, to go to these very, very low tech methods for marketing, because now they're so distinctive from the mass Gen AI emails or the mass targeting that everybody engages in. And so we've incorporated back in person events, and yes, we're considering sending FedEx packages and whatnot, because at least it'll get noticed. And so while we are engaging in some of the new technologies that Gen AI can afford, mass customization of emails, et cetera, I'm also really intrigued by the full circle back to the low tech of marketing.
Awesome. So let's discuss a little bit about the challenges, because I believe every entrepreneur faces a lot of challenges. In fact, challenges are meant to be for the entrepreneurs. So you must have faced many challenges. Can you share one biggest challenge that you have faced and how you were able to cope up with it?
Yeah. Yeah. So I think certainly the biggest one we faced so far in our short history thus far is a question of focus. And I think it's a question that probably most every entrepreneur faces in their entrepreneurial endeavors. Because when we started the organization, it had these kind of two focus areas of professional services partner finder and acquisition target finder. And we did and still do think there was a lot of opportunity in both, and we really didn't want to give up on either. Like every entrepreneur, we wanted to tackle it all because we thought we could. And so it was quite difficult to make that decision to focus on one for the time being. Now I think what we finally came to is that yes, to some extent you need to let intuition be your guide, but mostly you need to be listening to the marketplace and what the data is telling you about what that marketplace wants. And as we went out to market and engaged in some of these marketing experiments, reaching out to various demographics and with different messages, it became really, really clear that there was much more receptivity on the M&A kind of acquisition targeting space, right? We were seeing higher open rates, higher reply rates, more meetings, like, this constellation of data points that told us that no matter how we felt about it, the market felt like, this was a right time for M&A targeting to be the focus. And so as hard as it was to make that pivot and to focus in that area, we knew it was the right call. I still think it's the right call. And so that was our journey to find that focus, because the alternative, not being focused, is also a quick path to death. So
Got it. So, in the light of all these things, what is the way of acquiring a new client? Because again, this is I can say, like, this is the process where most of the entrepreneurs face a lot of challenges, because this is probably a sensitive area, like acquiring a client. So, how this process looks like for your side?
Mhm. Yeah, so the question is, how do we go from, not knowing us all the way through to client acquisition and then becoming a user and
Yeah,
whatnot? Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, so that's a good question. So I think we've started to see some good success on the very front end of that funnel, at least generating, leads and initial interest. To the question of, what's the path from initial interest to becoming a client? Well, that's kind of the heart of, hitting on the right customer value proposition, right? And so what we've found through tons and tons of conversations with various folks in the M&A field is that they do resonate with this net problem. First of all, that triaging potential acquisition targets is very manual, time intensive, and difficult. And so we know that there's a problem, which is the very first part of a customer value proposition. The second is, what are the alternatives or competitors, right? And the alternatives in our case are, hiring business brokers or analysts or very, expensive and also time consuming things. And so the third part of our customer value proposition is what can you do that bests that alternative option, right? And so for us, Scored can analyze, hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands of potential acquisition targets in minutes at a fraction of the cost of those alternatives. And so the base value proposition is really compelling for folks. And so when we're on these calls to describe that to folks, it's kind of hard to ignore the efficiency gain they're using something like Scored, especially because there's so few competitors in this exact space, in that kind of ecosystem I was going over before. And so that initial interest is not that difficult, but then what we found is that doing some kind of practical proof of concept has been quite helpful. And so in our case, what that looks like is actually conducting some small scan of a market to say, all right, if we analyzed even this 100 companies based on your unique investment thesis, what would that return? And how much time would you have saved just by doing that small scan, right? And if we can, demonstrably prove that we're going to save them, tens or hundreds of hours of time for Y cost, and they can see that math in their own head, then it's pretty straightforward to come on board, because the rationale is there and the business model is there.
So, is in this process, is there any educational material added? Like, is there any side where you need to educate your clients or need to spread some awareness? Because I believe to understand all these things, one, there's a great possibility that someone doesn't have any information about all these things. So, how you educate them?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that for the kind of clients that we're going after who are generally, either the mid-level or senior level of, an M&A function at a company, or if they're an M&A advisory or in private equity or investment banking, which are our primary target markets. They tend to know that problem space very well, because at least for the roles that we're looking at, this is what they do day in and day out, is how to either find direct investment opportunities for them or for their clients if they're an M&A advisory or a middleman of some sort. And so they tend to know the space and the problem very well. What they don't know as well is the application of artificial intelligence and scored to that problem space. And so to your point, there is some level of education that needs to go on how tools like this can augment existing workflows, because the M&A technology space is pretty dispersed, right? There's so many different tools that take care of very little slices of that whole problem. And so there's education that we have to do around, what is scored, how does it work, how is it different than other, folks in that ecosystem. But I think that part's kind of fascinating to me, because it requires being able to explain in layman's terms how artificial intelligence can gather this massive amount of data and turn it into something practically useful for them, which, in general, I think is a topic that is going to be huge, obviously, is huge in the coming years, right? There's, I find there's generally like a bell curve of understanding of artificial intelligence, like there isn't anything. And I love being a part of the front end of that bell curve to help bring other folks along to help understand how and where it can be useful. And just grappling with that topic of how it's going to change our society in the coming years is something I just love being on the forefront of.
Awesome. Awesome. All right. So, like in terms of next 3 to 6 months, you can say like, what are your short-term goals?
Yeah. So short-term goals, really to start building our customer base, to continue building our customer base and refining the product. Because I think it's, only with those users' feedback that it's going to improve and grow and expand capabilities in areas where they really care about. And so I think those are probably our two main focus areas. One is client acquisition and two is product growth. So yeah, in a nutshell, that'd be it.
Awesome. So, Zach, what would be your biggest piece of advice for our viewers? Our viewers are mostly entrepreneurs, business owners, or maybe the ones who are going to, who are dreaming about to be their own boss.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a tagline for the company Y Combinator that says, build something people want, right? A lot of your followers are probably familiar with Y Combinator. They're a startup accelerator, investment firm, etc. But I love how simply they've captured the essence of entrepreneurship to me, which is just build something people want, right? Which seems simple, but is the hardest thing in entrepreneurship, is to really deeply understand what the kind of customer client need that you're solving is in a really deep level, and really understanding how what you're doing is far and away better than the alternatives, right? That is an incredibly difficult thing to do. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs, myself included at times, focus so much on the what they're doing. And I'm going to be the best consultant, I'm going to be the best maker of this widget in the world, but not as much on the outside in perspective of what is the problem I'm solving, for whom, and how is it better than that alternative. And it's really those basics that are tried and true. And when people get them wrong, that's when businesses go awry, and when they get them right, that's when you have real potential.
Awesome. That's a great advice for sure. All right. So, Zach, you can share your website, your social media handles, or whatever you want to share so that people can reach you if they want to.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Reachable at scored.com. That's SC0RED.com. And all of our contact and everything is available there. Scored.com.
Awesome. That's great. Thank you. Thank you, Zach. I really enjoyed the conversation, and I will wish you best of luck. And thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, Qasim. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a good day. Bye-bye.